He smirked as he handed me my termination papers. The family business needs experienced leadership, not sentimentality, my brother told me. What he didn't know was that I'd built our biggest client relationship from nothing. When they heard about my dismissal, they pulled their 8-figure contract and brought me on as their new director of operations. Before we dive into this story of betrayal and vindication, if you're enjoying these real-life tales of justice, consider subscribing to our channel. It's completely free and helps us bring you more incredible stories every week. Now, let's begin. I stood in silence, watching Mark clear out my office. His smug expression barely concealed his excitement as he ran his fingers over the mahogany desk. The same desk where our father had taught me everything about the construction business for the past 5 years. Mitchell Construction and Development, the company Dad had built from nothing over 3 decades, was now under Mark's control. And his first official act as CEO? Firing his own sister. "It's nothing personal, Ellie," he said, though the gleam in his eyes told a different story. "The board agrees we need someone with more experience in that corner office. You've always been more of a people person than a numbers person." I carefully packed my awards from the National Builders Association, including last year's Relationship Manager of the Year trophy. The crystal monument caught the morning light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls, rainbows Mark didn't even notice. "That's just industry fluff," he said, nodding dismissively at my awards. "Anyone can win those if they attend enough networking events." I bit my tongue, remembering the countless nights I'd stayed late preparing detailed proposals that won us contracts while Mark was posting business conference selfies on Instagram. "Don't worry," he continued, straightening the new CEO nameplate on what was previously my desk. "I'll make sure you get a decent severance package. After all, we're still family?" The word family sounded hollow coming from his lips, the same lips that had been whispering to board members for months, planting seeds of doubt about my capabilities. Through the glass wall, I could see the executive team waiting outside. 5 men in nearly identical suits, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and relief. They'd all voted with Mark at the emergency board meeting yesterday, a meeting I'd been strategically kept from attending while visiting our biggest client, Horizon Developments. "You've been with the company, 5 years?" Mark continued, scrolling through his phone as I packed. "I've been preparing for this role my entire life." What Mark didn't mention was that he'd spent those years collecting business degrees and then hiding out in our satellite office in Phoenix, while I'd been here in Chicago, working directly with our father, learning every aspect of the business, from the ground up. I'd been the one answering Dad's 2 a.m. calls about project emergencies. I'd been the one who stepped up when Dad's health started failing last year. "The construction industry is changing, Ellie," Mark said, settling into my chair, Dad's chair. "We need to pivot toward commercial high-rises. Your focus on relationship building and community projects is quaint, but not where the real money is." I placed my personal photos into the cardboard box. Mom and Dad at the groundbreaking of our first major project. The team celebrating. When we won Contractor of the Year, the ribbon cutting at the community center we'd built pro bono last summer. "By the way," Mark added, "I've restructured the executive team, brought in some people with real vision." "You mean your business school buddies," I said, finally breaking my silence. Mark's expression hardened momentarily before his practiced smile returned. "People with MBAs from actual prestigious universities, yes. Not everyone believes experience is just hanging around job sites talking to contractors." That stung. I'd chosen to start working right after my undergraduate degree, learning the business from the ground up rather than from textbooks. Dad had always said, "You can't lead builders if you've never worn a hard hat." As I placed my hard hat, covered in scuffs and signatures from project teams over the years, into my box, Mark's new VP of Operations walked in. Chad Jenkins, Mark's former roommate, barely acknowledged me. "We should discuss the Horizon transition," Chad said to Mark, as if I weren't even there. Scheduled for this afternoon, Mark replied. I'm thinking we pitch them on upgrading to our premium service tier. Increase the contract by at least 20%. I nearly laughed out loud. Horizon's CEO, Rebecca Torres, had specifically declined that option 3 times already. She valued quality and relationship over upsells and gimmicks. As I carried my box toward the elevator, I could hear Mark's new executive team filtering into my former office, their congratulatory voices and laughter carrying down the hallway. No one made eye contact with me as I waited for the elevator doors to open. Not even Sandra from accounting, who'd just last week thanked me for pushing through her maternal leave extension. Good luck with your future endeavors, called Mark's new assistant, hired yesterday to replace Monica, who'd been with the company for 20 years and was dismissed this morning along with 3 other legacy employees. I maintained my composure as the elevator doors closed, the company logo, designed by our father, etched into the polished steel. Mark had already mentioned his plans to modernize it. As the elevator descended, so did the weight of reality. After 5 years of 70-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, and postponed vacations, I was out, discarded by my own brother. But appearances can be deceiving. What Mark didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had my phone interview with Horizon Developments in exactly 2 hours. The same Horizon Developments whose $12 million contract represented 40% of our company's annual revenue. The same client whose CEO, Rebecca Torres, had become not just a business contact, but a personal mentor over the years I'd managed their account. The same client who had called me directly last night, concerned about rumors of leadership changes at Mitchell Construction. Ellie? Rebecca had said, her voice deadly serious. If what I'm hearing is true, we need to talk about Horizon's future with Mitchell. And your future, too. The rain was coming down in sheets as I drove away from Mitchell Construction headquarters, i.e., 6-story building our father had proudly purchased when I was just starting high school. I remembered the day he'd taken Mark and me to see it, his weathered hands gesturing excitedly at what was then a rundown office building from the 1980s. This is our future, Dad had said, his voice full of the quiet confidence that had defined him. Mitchell Construction is going to be something special. Mark, already 17 and preparing for his business school applications, had immediately asked about square footage and property values. I, barely 15, had asked about where everyone would sit and if we could design a better break room for the construction crews when they came in from the field. Those different perspectives had defined our relationship with the family business from the beginning. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot, still 30 minutes early for my call with Rebecca Torres. As the windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm, I found myself remembering how Mitchell Construction had shaped my entire life, and how differently Mark and I had experienced it. Dad, Robert Mitchell, had started the company with a single pickup truck and a toolbox passed down from his father. His first projects were small renovations, basement finishes, and deck builds. For the first decade, Mitchell Construction was just Dad and whoever he could hire project by project. Mom kept the books from our dining room table. Mark was never interested in that history. When classmates asked what his father did, he would say he's in real estate development, rather than he's a builder. Even as kids, I would beg to visit job sites while Mark would complain about the dust and noise. By the time I was in high school, Dad had grown the business significantly. Mitchell Construction had 40 full-time employees and had moved from residential renovations to small commercial projects, strip malls, medical offices, and municipal buildings. The summer I turned 16, I asked to work as an assistant to the project managers. Dad hesitated, worried about nepotism, but finally agreed to let me earn minimum wage running documents between job sites. I spent that summer learning everything I could: how to read blueprints, the sequence of construction phases, which subcontractors were reliable and which needed constant supervision. Mark, meanwhile, was interning at an investment bank in New York, coming home with stories about expense accounts and networking events. When Dad proudly showed him pictures of a community center we'd just completed, Mark's first question was about the profit margin. Our paths continued to diverge through college. I studied construction management at the state university, spending summers and holidays working at the company. Mark went to an Ivy League business school, returning home with increasingly firm ideas about how Dad should restructure the company for maximum valuation. The pivotal moment came during my senior year of college. Dad had landed our first truly major contract, a $7 million office complex for a regional insurance company. It was a huge leap forward for Mitchell Construction, but it came with enormous pressure. The client was demanding, the timeline was tight, and the budget had almost no margin for error. 2 weeks into the project, our primary project manager had a heart attack. "I need someone to step in immediately," Dad told me over the phone. "Someone who knows our systems and can talk to both the client and the subcontractors." I dropped everything, including my final exams, which I had to reschedule, and stepped in as assistant project manager. For 3 months, I worked alongside Dad and our team, putting in 16-hour days to keep the project on track. We delivered it on time and under budget. When the client hosted a ribbon-cutting ceremony, Dad insisted I stand next to him in the photos. "This wouldn't have happened without Ellie," he told everyone who would listen. "She's got the Mitchell spirit." Mark missed that ceremony. He was in Europe on a business school trip. When he saw the company newsletter featuring me and Dad cutting the ribbon, he called immediately. "What's this about Ellie being the future of the company?" he demanded. Dad tried to smooth things over. "There's room for both of you," he insisted. "Mark, you've got the financial acumen we need. Ellie understands the people and the projects. You'll balance each other perfectly." But from that moment, I felt Mark watching me, measuring himself against me in Dad's eyes. What had been mild disinterest in the construction business suddenly became intense competition. After graduation, I joined Mitchell Construction full-time as a project manager. Mark finished his MBA and also came on board, but insisted on starting as Director of Strategic Development, a position Dad created specifically for him. Then came Horizon Developments and Rebecca Torres. Horizon was a rapidly growing property development firm looking to expand into our region. They were planning a series of mixed-use developments, combining retail, office, and residential spaces, and were searching for a construction partner who understood their vision of community-focused, sustainable buildings. The initial meeting didn't go well. Rebecca Torres was unimpressed with our portfolio presentation. "These are fine buildings," she said, flipping through our brochure. "But I don't see anything that tells me you understand what makes a space actually work for people." Mark, who had insisted on leading the presentation despite Dad's reservations, was flustered. He kept returning to our on-time completion rates and financial stability. After 30 uncomfortable minutes, Rebecca stood up. "Thank you for your time, but I don't think Mitchell Construction is the right partner for Horizon." As she gathered her materials, I made a split-second decision. "Ms. Torres," I said, "would you be willing to visit one of our sites before you make your final decision?" She paused, one eyebrow raised. "Which site did you have in mind?" "The Lakeside Community Center. It's not our biggest or most profitable project, but I think it might show you something our portfolio doesn't." Mark tried to interject, mentioning instead our recently completed office tower downtown. But Rebecca was already looking at me with renewed interest. "The community center, tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. The next day, I took Rebecca to the modest community center we'd built in one of the city's struggling neighborhoods. What made this project special wasn't its size or materials, but how we'd approached it. We'd engaged the community throughout the design process, incorporated local artwork, and created flexible spaces that could serve multiple purposes. "The neighborhood kids helped design this playground," I explained, showing her the colorful play structure. "We brought in local schools and had the children draw what they wanted, then our architects incorporated their ideas." As we walked through The building, I introduced her to the maintenance manager, whom we'd hired from the neighborhood and trained, and several community members who were already using the space. By the end of the tour, Rebecca's professional reserve had softened considerably. "This isn't just construction," she said as we stood in the central atrium, watching sunlight stream through the carefully positioned skylights. "This is community building." 2 days later, Horizon Developments signed their first contract with Mitchell Construction, a relatively small project to renovate an existing community shopping center. Rebecca insisted that I serve as the primary contact. "I want to work with someone who understands that buildings are for people," she said, looking directly at me while signing the contract. Dad was ecstatic. Mark was visibly irritated, but tried to hide it behind congratulations. Neither of them realized that this modest first project would eventually grow into the most significant client relationship in company history. Over the next 4 years, Horizon continued to grow, and with each successful project, they brought more business to Mitchell Construction. What started as a small renovation blossomed into a partnership worth millions annually. With each project, Rebecca and I developed a stronger professional relationship built on shared values and mutual respect. Meanwhile, Dad's health began to decline. A lifetime of physical labor had taken its toll, and heart problems forced him to gradually step back from day-to-day operations. Mark and I both took on more responsibilities, but in very different areas. I focused on client relationships and project quality, often visiting sites daily and maintaining close contact with project managers. Mark concentrated on financial operations and expansion planning, working primarily from the office and attending industry conferences. When Dad officially decided to step down as CEO 8 months ago, he called a family dinner with just the 3 of us. "I've built something I'm proud of," he told us, his voice weaker than it once was, but still carrying that quiet authority. "Now it's time for the next generation to take Mitchell Construction even further." Mark immediately sat up straighter. "I've been preparing for this, Dad. My strategic plan for the company." Dad held up a hand. "I haven't made my decision yet. You both bring different strengths to the table. I need to think about what's best for the company, for our employees, and for our clients." The drive back to my apartment that night was tense, with Mark unusually quiet in the passenger seat. "You know I'm the obvious choice," he finally said as I pulled up to his condo. "I have the education and the vision to take the company forward." "This isn't a competition, Mark," I replied. "Dad will make the right decision for the company." His laugh was sharp and humorless. "Everything's a competition, Ellie. You've just been too naive to see it." As I watched the rain continue to beat against my windshield in the coffee shop parking lot, I realized Mark had been planning this coup for months. While I'd been focused on maintaining client relationships and project quality during Dad's transition, away from daily operations, Mark had been systematically building allies on the board, leveraging Dad's reduced involvement to position himself as the natural successor. I checked my watch, 15 minutes until my call with Rebecca. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. The Mitchell family business would never be the same again. And neither would my relationship with my brother. The coffee shop was filling with the late morning rush when my phone buzzed. It was Monica, my father's longtime assistant, who had been unceremoniously dismissed that morning along with me. "Ellie? Are you okay?" Her voice was tight with concern. "I'm surviving," I replied, watching the rain streak down my windshield. "How about you? 20 years at Mitchell, and not even a proper goodbye." Monica's bitter laugh came through clearly. "Apparently, I'm not aligned with the new corporate vision. That's what your brother's HR puppet told me while security watched me pack my desk." I gripped my steering wheel tighter, picturing Monica, who had sent birthday cards to every employee's children for 2 decades, being escorted out like a criminal. "I'm so sorry, Monica. This isn't what Dad built the company to be." "Speaking of your father," Monica said, her voice dropping slightly, He's been trying to reach you. Mark told him you resigned to pursue other opportunities. He's blocked your number from the company phone system, but your dad is calling from his personal cell. The familiar wave of anger rose again. Of course Mark would control the narrative, even to our father. Before I could respond, another call beeped through. Dad's number. Monica, I need to take this. Let's talk later, and please, let me know if I can help with anything. I switched calls, taking a deep breath. Dad? It's Ellie. Sweetheart, what's going on? My father's voice sounded thin and tired. The heart surgery 6 months ago had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. Mark says you've resigned. Why didn't you talk to me first? I closed my eyes, choosing my words carefully. Dad's health was fragile, and the doctor had warned us about unnecessary stress. Dad? I didn't resign. Mark called an emergency board meeting yesterday while I was at the Horizon site visit. They voted to restructure leadership. Mark is CEO now, and I've been removed from the company. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Dad? Are you there? I'm here. His voice had hardened. So Mark lied to me. Again. Again? What do you mean? Another heavy pause. Come to the house this afternoon. There are things we need to discuss in person. Before I could ask more questions, Dad ended the call. I sat staring at my phone, unsettled by the conversation. What else had Mark lied about? And why had Dad said again with such resigned certainty? My phone chimed with a calendar reminder. 5 minutes until my call with Rebecca. I pushed aside the questions about my father and focused on preparing for what might be the most important conversation of my career. The call connected precisely at the scheduled time. Rebecca Torres wasn't known for wasting a single minute. Ellie, I'm distressed by what I'm hearing, she began without preamble. Gordon McKenzie from Fraser Development called me this morning to confirm if Mitchell Construction is really undergoing a dramatic leadership restructuring. Apparently, your brother has been reaching out to our competitors, informing them of changes that would elevate the company's capabilities. I winced. Fraser was Horizon's main competitor, and Gordon McKenzie was notoriously loose-lipped. Mark was deliberately spreading the word about his takeover, positioning it as a positive evolution rather than the coup it actually was. Rebecca, I won't lie to you. Mark called an emergency board meeting yesterday and had me removed from my position. He's now CEO and has brought in his own executive team. And what does this mean for our Wellington Heights project? Her voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the underlying concern. Wellington Heights was Horizon's flagship development, a $40 million mixed-use project that would transform an entire neighborhood. We'd spent months collaborating on the intricate plans. Mark intends to continue the project, but with a different project management team. His MBA friends from Phoenix? The edge in her voice was now unmistakable. Yes, Chad Jenkins will be overseeing Wellington Heights starting today. Chad Jenkins. Rebecca repeated the name slowly. The same Chad Jenkins who couldn't answer basics questions about sustainable building materials at last month's planning meeting? The one who suggested we simplify the community garden component because it was just landscaping? The very same. Rebecca's sigh was heavy with disappointment. Ellie, I didn't partner with Mitchell Construction. I partnered with you, and your approach to community-centered development. Your brother's vision, from what I've seen of it, is entirely focused on profit margins and speed of completion. That's a fair assessment, I admitted. Let me be direct. Our contract with Mitchell has a key personnel clause. Your father insisted we put it in there. Said it protected both parties from bait-and-switch tactics. With you gone, we have grounds to review or even terminate the relationship. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. I understand. And what are you thinking at this point? That depends, Rebecca said. What are you thinking, Ellie? I know this is your family's company. I respect that. But I also know your work, your values, and your potential. This was the moment, the fork in the road. I could either encourage Rebecca to give Mark a chance, protecting the family company but enabling my brother's betrayal, or I could consider the possibility that my future might lie elsewhere. I need to think, I answered honestly. This has all happened very quickly. Of course. Let's talk again tomorrow morning. And Ellie, I'm truly sorry about how this has unfolded. Family business can be complicated. As I ended the call, my phone immediately lit up with a text from Mark. Heard you might be talking to Horizon. Remember your non-compete clause. Any attempt to poach clients will result in immediate legal action. Nothing personal, just business. The text message perfectly encapsulated my brother's approach to life. Claim it's just business, while making everything intensely personal. The non-compete clause had been Mark's addition to all executive contracts 3 years ago. Over Dad's objections. I thought back to how things had steadily deteriorated between Mark and me over the past several years. What had started as healthy sibling rivalry had morphed into something darker and more calculated. The pattern began shortly after I secured the Horizon account. Suddenly, my project reports needed additional review before being submitted to the board. Resources for my teams became harder to obtain, while Mark's strategic initiatives received immediate approval. When I raised concerns, I was labeled as territorial or overly emotional. One incident stood out vividly. 8 months ago, just as Dad's health took a serious turn, I had developed a comprehensive proposal for expanding our sustainable building practices. The proposal included detailed financial projections showing how these changes would actually increase profitability over time while positioning Mitchell Construction as an industry leader. I had scheduled a presentation to the board with Dad's enthusiastic support. The night before, Mark had stopped by my office. "Hey, sis," he said, leaning against my doorframe with practiced casualness. "About tomorrow's presentation, I think we should postpone." I looked up from my preparation notes. Postpone? Why? I've been working on this for months. Dad's not feeling well. The doctor advised against any stressful meetings. Concern immediately overrode everything else. Is he okay? Should I call him? He's resting, but he asked me to handle the board meeting tomorrow. You know how he gets. Wouldn't admit he's unwell even if he were having a heart attack at the table. I nodded slowly. Dad was indeed stubborn about his health. Fine. We can reschedule my presentation for next month. Mark's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Great, I'll let the board know. What I discovered later, through Monica, was that Dad had been feeling fine. Not only that, but Mark had used the scheduled board meeting to present his own 5-year strategic plan, which included gradually phasing out less profitable community projects in favor of high-margin commercial work. The very projects that had built our reputation and secured loyal clients like Horizon were dismissed as legacy commitments that didn't align with future growth. By the time I learned what had happened, the board had already approved Mark's preliminary plan. When I confronted him, his response was simple. You focus on building relationships, I focus on building the business. We all play to our strengths. That pattern of undermining and misrepresentation continued in dozens of small ways. Project successes that my teams achieved were presented to the board as company-wide wins, with my name conspicuously absent from the reports. Client feedback praising my approach was filtered through Mark's presentations, reframed as endorsements of the company's new direction. Perhaps most painful was how Mark gradually repositioned himself as Dad's primary caregiver during his health crisis. He scheduled doctor's appointments during times I was committed to critical site visits. He reported selectively to me about Dad's condition, often leaving out important details that would have prompted me to be present. I remember arriving at the hospital after Dad's surgery to find Mark sitting beside him, reviewing company documents. as Dad drifted in and out of sleep. "Where have you been?" Mark had asked, his voice just low enough not to wake Dad but sharp enough to cut. "The doctor was here an hour ago." "You told me the doctor was coming at 4, I replied, checking my watch. "It's 3:15. Mark's shrug was deliberate. "Schedule. Must have changed. You should have been here earlier anyway. Family first, right?" It was a masterful move, positioning me as the child who prioritized work over family, while he played the devoted son. The fact that I'd been at a community meeting for the Wellington Heights project, addressing resident concerns about construction disruption, wasn't relevant to his narrative. By the time Dad stepped back from daily operations, Mark had successfully created a story that the board, the executives, and even some of the employees believed. Mark was the business visionary with the education and strategic mind to lead the company forward. Ellie was the people person who was good with clients but lacked the hard-headed business acumen necessary for growth. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. It was from Chad Jenkins, copying the entire executive team, all. "Horizon development projects will now operate under revised protocols. Previous management approaches are discontinued effective immediately. Project managers, please report for reorientation meeting at 2 p.m. today." Attached was a new organizational chart. The entire project management team that had been working on Horizon's developments, professionals I had carefully selected and mentored, had been reassigned to smaller projects. In their place were names I didn't recognize, presumably Chad's. Connections from Phoenix. I forwarded the email to Rebecca with a brief note. "FYI, changes already happening." Her response came back immediately. "Meeting moved up. Let's talk at 5 p.m. today instead of tomorrow. This is unacceptable." Rain continued to drum on my car roof as I considered my options. I had a meeting with Dad this afternoon, an increasingly urgent conversation with Rebecca Torres at 5 p.m., and a brother who had just threatened legal action against me. Whatever happened next would determine not just my career, but the fate of the company my father had built from nothing, a company that now barely resembled the vision he had created. The rain had finally stopped by the time I pulled into my father's driveway. The sprawling craftsman-style home, the first major purchase Dad had made after Mitchell Construction began to succeed, sat nestled among mature oak trees, its riverstone exterior weathered by decades of Midwestern seasons. Dad had insisted on building the wraparound porch himself, spending weekends laying the recycled timber boards while Mom supervised and mixed lemonade. Mark and I had helped, though helped in 10-year-old Mark's case meant mostly complaining about missing time with his friends. As I climbed the familiar porch steps, I noticed that the seasonal flowers Mom always planted were missing this year. Since her passing 3 years ago, the home had gradually lost some of its warmth, despite Dad's best efforts. Mark had repeatedly suggested that Dad sell the outdated house and move into a sleek downtown condo. Dad had always refused. Houses. Need to breathe with families, he'd said. I'll keep this home breathing as long as I'm around. I knocked briefly before using my key. Dad? It's me. In the study, his voice called, stronger than it had sounded on the phone. I found him seated at his old desk, surrounded by stacks of file boxes and loose papers. The scene was so unusual that I stopped in the doorway. Dad was meticulous about organization, a trait essential for a successful builder. What's all this? Dad looked up, his face grim but determined. Insurance, he said cryptically. Close the door and sit down. As I settled into the leather chair across from him, I noticed an open folder between us. At the top was the original Mitchell Construction Incorporation document, my father's signature bold across the bottom. Did you know, Dad began, that when your grandfather passed, he left his toolbox to both his sons, my brother Thomas and me. But Thomas wanted cash instead, said tools were worthless compared to a quick payout. I nodded. Uncle Thomas was rarely mentioned in our family. He'd moved to California decades ago, starting a series of failed businesses. I bought him out, took every penny I had saved. He laughed, thinking he'd gotten the better deal. Dad's weathered fingers traced the edge of the document. 2 years later, I used those same tools to start Mitchell Construction. He looked up at me, his eyes clear and sharp despite his recent health struggles. History has a way of repeating itself, especially in families. I shifted uncomfortably. Dad, about what happened at the company? He held up a hand. I know more than you think, Ellie. Monica has kept me informed for months. Your brother's been planning this coup since my surgery. You knew? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Of course I knew. Why do you think I've been gathering all this? He gestured to the boxes surrounding us. Mark thinks he's the only one who understands strategy. For the first time that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. Dad was still Dad, still the shrewd builder who could survey a chaotic job site and immediately identify both problems and solutions. These, he continued, pulling the nearest box closer, are the original contract documents for every major client relationship you've developed over the past 5 years, including all the Horizon projects. He handed me a thick folder labeled Horizon Developments, Master Agreement, page 42, section 11.3, he instructed. I flipped to the section and scanned the dense legal text. The key personnel clause? Keep reading. As I continued through the carefully worded legal language, my eyes widened. This isn't a standard key personnel provision. This specifically names me as the relationship manager and gives Horizon the right to terminate without penalty if I'm removed from their account. Dad nodded, a hint of his old smile appearing. Rebecca Torres insisted on it, said she was investing in your vision, not just the Mitchell name. But Mark must know about this clause. Why would he risk losing Horizon by firing me? Dad's expression darkened. Because he doesn't know. This version of the contract was finalized when he was in Phoenix setting up the satellite office. He has access to the digital record system, but this particular amendment was only filed in hard copy. I stared at my father, a mix of emotions swirling. That seems underhanded? Dad supplied. Perhaps. But I've spent 40 years building this company, watching how people operate, learning who I can trust. I've always maintained certain safeguards. He reached for another box, this one labeled Corporate Governance. These are the original board resolutions establishing executive authority. Mark's emergency board meeting violated at least 3 procedural requirements. The vote was invalid. With each file Dad showed me, it became increasingly clear. He had been quietly preparing for this possibility, creating a network of legal protections and contractual leverages that Mark had either overlooked or never known existed. What about the non-compete clause? I asked. Mark's already threatening legal action if I talk to Horizon. Dad's laugh was short and sharp. Check your employment contract. The version you signed has a specific exemption for clients you personally brought to the company. You added that without telling Mark? I added it for all executives. Mark was the one who insisted on the non-compete language in the first place, but I modified it. He never actually read the final documents, too busy with his strategic planning to bother with details. Dad's tone carried decades of builder's wisdom. The details were where success or failure was determined. For the next hour, Dad walked me through the various protections he had established, legal, financial, and relational. Each revelation showed me a side of my father I'd glimpsed but never fully appreciated. Robert Mitchell wasn't just a skilled builder. He was a master strategist who had anticipated potential threats to his life's work. Why didn't you tell me? Any of this before? I finally asked. Dad's expression softened. I was hoping it wouldn't be necessary. I wanted to believe Mark would grow into the kind of leader who values people as much as profits, that he'd recognize your contributions and work alongside you. He sighed heavily. I wanted my children to be partners, not adversaries. the weight of his disappointment was palpable. Despite all his preparation, what Dad truly wanted was a family and company united by shared values. "There's one more thing," he said, opening his desk drawer and removing a sealed envelope. This was supposed to be read at next month's board meeting. My official recommendation for the next CEO of Mitchell Construction. He handed me the envelope, still sealed with the company's embossed logo. "Go ahead," he nodded. With slightly trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the single page. At the top, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, "Recommendation for Chief Executive Officer, Eleanor Mitchell." My eyes filled with tears as I read his detailed explanation of why he believed I was the right person to lead the company forward, my understanding of both the technical and human aspects of construction, my success with client relationships, my commitment to the company's founding values while embracing innovation. "Dad, Words failed me. "Mark found this," Dad said quietly. "3 weeks ago, he came here to help me with some paperwork and saw it on my desk when I stepped out to take a call." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Mark's accelerated timeline, the hastily called board meeting while I was away, the immediate dismissal. "He knew you were choosing me." Dad nodded grimly. "And he couldn't accept it. Rather than proving himself worthy of the position, he decided to take it." Sitting among the carefully preserved documents of Mitchell Construction's history, I realized that my father had been preparing me for leadership in ways I hadn't fully recognized. Each project he'd assigned me, each client relationship he'd encouraged me to develop, each aspect of the business he'd patiently taught me, all of it had been deliberate preparation. "What do we do now?" I asked. "That depends on what you want." "Ellie, I want to honor your legacy," I said without hesitation. "I want Mitchell Construction to remain the kind of company that builds communities, not just buildings." Dad smiled, the familiar warmth returning to his eyes. "Then you already know what to do." He gestured to the Horizon contract still open, in my lap. "Rebecca Torres didn't partner with Mitchell Construction. She partnered with you." My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Meeting moved to 6 p.m., bringing our legal counsel. Please confirm." I showed the message to Dad. "Looks like you have a decision to make," he said. "But before you go..." He reached for one final folder, this one newer than the others. "I've been working with my personal attorney to create a backup plan. If Mark is determined to take Mitchell Construction in a direction that betrays its founding principles, perhaps it's time for a new Mitchell company to emerge." The folder contained preliminary incorporation documents for Mitchell Legacy Builders, with my name listed as founder and CEO. "Dad, are you suggesting I start a competing company?" His expression was both sad and resolute. "I'm suggesting that my life's work isn't a building or even a company. It's the values I've tried to instill and the people I've mentored. If Mitchell Construction can't continue that legacy under Mark's leadership, then perhaps the legacy needs a new home." As I drove toward my meeting with Rebecca, the folder from my father sat on the passenger seat beside me. Inside was not just the framework for a new company, but a list of loyal employees who might join me, potential projects already in development, and, most surprisingly, a significant personal investment from my father himself. "Your brother may have taken the company name," Dad had said as I left, "but he can't take what really matters: the relationships, the knowledge, and the principles that actually built our success." I thought about the team that had worked on Horizon's projects, dedicated professionals who shared the Mitchell Construction ethos that had existed before Mark's takeover. Many had already texted or called, expressing outrage at my dismissal and concern about the company's new direction. There was Javier, our sustainability specialist, who had been with us for 15 years and had pioneered our green building practices. Sophie in project management, whose meticulous attention to detail had saved countless scheduling disasters. Tyler, the young architect we'd hired fresh out of school, who had grown into one of our most innovative designers. Mark might have the Mitchell Construction name and the existing contracts, but the heart of what made the company successful, the people, the relationships, and the values, could potentially follow me. As I pulled into the parking lot of Rebecca's office building, I realized I'd been preparing for this moment my entire career without knowing it. Every relationship I'd built, every project challenge I'd overcome, every lesson my father had taught me, all of it had equipped me for what came next. The choice before me wasn't just about my career or even about family loyalty. It was about honoring a legacy built on integrity, community, and craftsmanship. Whether that legacy continued under the original Mitchell Construction name or emerged as something new, the principles would remain the same. I gathered my materials, including the critical contract documents my father had provided, and headed into the building. Whatever decision I made in the next hour would shape not just my future, but the future of everything my father had built, and everything I hoped to build from here. Rebecca Torres's office occupied the top floor of Horizon Development's headquarters, AAG, building they had renovated 3 years ago as their flagship project. Unlike the ostentatious glass towers favored by their competitors, Horizon had chosen to restore a historic warehouse, preserving its industrial character while transforming the interior into a model of sustainable design. The receptionist, who knew me well from countless planning meetings, greeted me with a sympathetic smile. "They're waiting for you in the main conference room, Ellie. Rebecca said to send you right in." As I approached the conference room, I could see through the glass walls that Rebecca wasn't alone. Besides her general counsel, David Chen, there were 4 other people I recognized immediately. Gordon McKenzie from Fraser Development, whom Mark had contacted that morning. Patricia Williams, the city's Director of Urban Development. James Wilson, President of the Regional Construction, Workers Union, and Caroline Davis, head of the Westside Neighborhood Association, a community leader whose support had been crucial for the Wellington Heights project. This wasn't just a meeting about a contract issue. Rebecca had assembled a group representing every major stakeholder in our ongoing projects. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. "Ellie," Rebecca rose to greet me. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." The others nodded or offered quiet greetings as I took the one empty seat. On the conference table in front of each person was a folder with the Mitchell Construction SAW logo. "I've asked everyone here today because we face a situation that affects all of our interests," Rebecca began. "As you know, Mitchell Construction has undergone an abrupt leadership change. What you may not know is how this change threatens the very foundations of the Wellington Heights development and potentially other community projects." She nodded to David, who opened his folder. "This morning, we received this amended project plan from the new leadership at Mitchell Construction." He pressed a button, and the large screen on the wall displayed a revised site plan for Wellington Heights. Even at a glance, I could see dramatic changes. The community spaces had been significantly reduced, the promised mixed-income housing component had been scaled back, and the sustainable design elements that had been central to the project's vision had been eliminated or downgraded. These changes, David continued, were submitted as cost optimization measures, with a note assuring us they would not affect the overall quality of the project. Caroline Davis, the Neighborhood Association president, made a sound of disgust. "This eliminates almost everything the community fought for. The daycare center, the local business incubator spaces, the community garden, all gone or reduced to token gestures." James Wilson from the union nodded grimly. "And these labor optimization notes essentially mean cutting corners on site safety and pushing workers to meet unrealistic deadlines." Patricia Williams, representing the city, looked troubled. "These changes would violate several conditions. Of the tax incentives and zoning variances we approved specifically because of the community benefits this project promised." Gordon McKenzie, the competitor from Fraser Development, was the only one who seemed unsurprised. "Classic profit maximization strategy," Eliminate the extras that don't directly generate revenue. I received a call from Mark Mitchell this morning, suggesting we might collaborate on standardizing industry approaches to community projects. His air quotes made clear what he thought of that suggestion. Rebecca turned to me. Ellie, I asked you here because for 5 years you've been the voice and face of Mitchell Construction to all of us. You've built trust, delivered on promises, and helped us create projects that serve more than just the bottom line. Now, in a single day, your brother has attempted to undo all of that. She slid a document across the table to me, the original contract with the key personnel clause highlighted. As your father wisely ensured, we have the legal right to terminate our relationship with Mitchell Construction over your removal. But that still leaves us with a problem. She gestured to the screen showing the altered project plans. Wellington Heights and our other projects need to move forward with someone we trust. My heart raced as I realized what was happening. This wasn't just a meeting about a contract dispute. This was something much bigger. David Chen, the lawyer, cleared his throat. Before we continue, I should note that we're aware of your non-compete agreement with Mitchell Construction. However, we've had our legal team review it, and we believe it's unenforceable in this specific situation, particularly given the circumstances of your termination and the specific client exemption clause. I nodded, thinking of the documents my father had shown me earlier. I have information that supports that conclusion. Rebecca leaned forward. Ellie, I'll be direct. Horizon Developments wants to continue working with you, not with the new leadership at Mitchell Construction. The question is, what form would that take? The room fell silent as everyone awaited my response. This was the moment of decision, the crossroads my father had prepared me for without my even realizing it. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Meeting with Horizon team tomorrow, 9 a.m. to discuss project adjustments. Need all your client notes. And contact information transferred to Chad by EOD. Legal reminder. Client relationships belong to the company, not to individuals. Something inside me, something that had been bending and bending under years of Mark's manipulations, finally broke. I looked up at the assembled group, these people who had worked with me, trusted me, and created meaningful projects alongside me. Mitchell Construction, as it existed yesterday, the company my father built, valued community impact as much as profit margins. We believed construction wasn't just about buildings, but about the people who would live, work, and grow inside. Them. I met each person's eyes in turn. That Mitchell Construction effectively ceased to exist the moment my brother took control. I opened my bag and removed the folder my father had given me, the incorporation documents for Mitchell Legacy. Builders. But the values, experience, and relationships that made Mitchell Construction successful don't disappear with a change in leadership. They reside in people, in the teams that designed and built each project, in the community partnerships we've developed, and in the vision we share for what construction can achieve. Rebecca's eyes gleamed with interest as I continued. I came here today prepared to discuss a transition plan for your projects, to help ensure continuity despite my departure. But I see now there might be another possibility. I placed the folder on the table. With my father's support, I'm prepared to establish a new company dedicated to continuing the true Mitchell legacy of community-focused, sustainable construction. If given the opportunity, I would bring with me the core team members who have worked directly on Horizon's projects, people who share our values and understand our mutual vision. Caroline Davis, the Neighborhood Association president, was the first to respond. The community trusted you, Ellie. The people in my neighborhood don't care what name is on the construction signs. They care about who's making decisions that affect their lives. James Wilson nodded. My members have always appreciated how your sites prioritize safety and fair working conditions. That's about leadership, not company names. Patricia Williams from the city added, from the municipality's perspective, we're concerned with capacity to deliver on commitments. If you can demonstrate that your new entity has the necessary expertise and resources, the city would certainly consider transferring project approvals. Gordon Mackenzie, surprisingly, spoke in support as well. The industry needs companies with integrity. Competition should be about who can build better, not who can cut more corners. For what it's worth, I'd welcome Mitchell Legacy Builders to the market. Rebecca had been watching these exchanges carefully. Now she turned to David. What would need to happen from a legal and practical standpoint? The lawyer consulted his notes. Horizon could exercise the key personnel clause to terminate the existing contracts without penalty. We could then enter into new agreements with the new entity, assuming it meets our vendor qualification requirements. And those requirements? Rebecca asked. Proper licensing, insurance, bonding capacity, demonstrated expertise, most of which can be established relatively quickly with the right backing. He looked at me. Particularly if Robert Mitchell is involved as you suggested. Rebecca turned back to me. The biggest hurdle would be demonstrating sufficient financial capacity to take on projects of this scale. Wellington Heights alone is a $40 million development. This was the moment of truth. While my father had offered financial support, it wouldn't be enough for projects of this magnitude. I had savings and industry connections, but establishing the necessary bonding capacity for major projects typically took years of company history. I took a deep breath. That would indeed be the challenge. While I'm confident in our ability to execute the work, securing the necessary financial backing would take time we may not have if these projects are to stay on schedule. Rebecca exchanged glances with David, some unspoken communication passing between them. What if, Rebecca said carefully, Horizon Developments were to structure a strategic partnership that would provide the necessary financial guarantees? We could establish a joint development entity specifically for the Wellington Heights project and potentially others. David nodded. A specialized joint venture would mitigate risk for both parties while allowing immediate commencement of operations. I stared at Rebecca, hardly believing what I was hearing. You would be willing to partner directly with a new company? Not with just any new company, Rebecca clarified. With you, Ellie, and the team that has consistently demonstrated they understand our vision. Sometimes the best way to manage risk isn't through corporate history, but through proven relationships with people you trust. The conversation shifted to practical considerations: how quickly the new company could be established, which team members might transition, how ongoing projects would be handled during the change. Each stakeholder offered insights from their perspective, outlining challenges but also expressing support for the solution taking shape. Throughout this discussion, my phone continued to buzz with messages from Mark, each more demanding than the last. Where are the Horizon contact files? Chad needs them immediately. The board wants an update on client retention status. Confirm you haven't violated your non-compete. Security needs your company laptop and badge returned by 5 p.m. today. Each message reinforced my conviction that the path forward lay not in fighting for control of Mitchell Construction, but in building something new that truly honored my father's legacy. As the meeting concluded, Rebecca asked everyone else to give us a few minutes alone. When the room had cleared, she turned to me with a serious expression. Ellie, I want to be completely transparent with you. This morning, your brother called me directly. My stomach tightened. What did he want? First, he explained your departure as a mutual decision based on strategic differences. Then he suggested that Horizon consider a 15% increase in our management fee structure to reflect the enhanced executive oversight their new team would provide. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, incredulous sound. He tried to raise your rates on the same day he gutted the project design. Rebecca nodded, her expression grim. When I questioned the project changes, he informed me that, while he valued our business, Mitchell Construction was evolving toward more commercially viable development models and that certain legacy commitments might need to be reassessed. Legacy commitments, I repeated. He means the promises we made to communities and stakeholders. Exactly. He finished by suggesting that if Horizon wasn't aligned with Mitchell's new vision, there were several other major developers eager to work with a forward-thinking construction partner. The audacity was breathtaking. In a single day, Marking had not only forced me out, but attempted to fundamentally alter the company's relationship with its most important client. That conversation, Rebecca continued, made my decision much easier. Wellington Heights isn't just another development for Horizon. It's a model for the kind of community-centered, sustainable projects we want to be known for. I need a construction partner who shares that vision, not one who sees it as an inconvenient legacy commitment. She handed me a business card. Not one of her standard Horizon cards, but a simple white card with just her personal cell phone number. Call me tomorrow. When you're ready to move forward. My legal team will prepare the necessary documents for both terminating the Mitchell construction contract and establishing our new partnership. As I stood to leave, Rebecca added one final thought. You know, Ellie, sometimes the most painful breaks become the foundation for building something even stronger. Your father understood that. It's why he built contingencies into those contracts. He was preparing for this possibility, even if he hoped it would never come. I nodded, thinking of the folders of documents my father had preserved, the safeguards he had quietly established, the guidance he had provided throughout my career. My father always says that the true measure of a builder isn't how they handle success, but how they respond when the structure is threatened. That's when you discover if your foundation is solid. Rebecca smiled. From what I've seen today, your foundation is rock solid. I look forward to building on it together. As I walked out of Horizon's headquarters, clutching the folder containing the future of Mitchell Legacy Builders, I felt something I hadn't experienced since seeing my termination papers that morning. Hope. The path ahead would be challenging, full of legal complications and practical hurdles, but for the first time, I could see beyond Mark's betrayal to the possibility of creating something even more aligned with my values and vision. My phone buzzed. One more time, another text from Mark. Final warning about client interference. Any attempt to undermine Mitchell Construction's client relationships will trigger immediate legal action. I smiled as I turned off my phone and placed it in my bag. Mark had always been so focused on contracts, organizational charts, and corporate structures that he'd missed the most important business lesson our father had taught us. Great companies aren't built on legal documents. They're built on relationships, trust, and shared values. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The sunrise painted Chicago's skyline in hues of gold and amber as I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by documents, notes, and 3 empty coffee cups. I had been up most of the night, methodically planning my next steps. My laptop displayed a spreadsheet with names, the core team I hoped to bring with me to Mitchell Legacy Builders. Javier Mendez, our sustainability director, whose innovative approaches had saved millions in operating costs while reducing environmental impact. Sophie Chen, senior project manager, whose legendary attention to detail had prevented countless potential disasters. Tyler Washington, the young architect whose fresh perspectives had earned us industry recognition. Monica Stevens, my father's longtime assistant, who knew more about the company's operations than anyone except Dad himself, and 17 others, skilled professionals who had directly contributed to our successful partnership with Horizon and other clients, people who shared the vision of construction as community building. Next to each name, I had notes on their current projects, contract status, and personal situations that might affect their decision to join a new venture. Some had young families and would prioritize stability. Others were more risk-tolerant and might welcome the challenge. All would be taking a significant leap of faith if they followed me. My phone rang, my father calling, despite the early hour. "You're up early," I answered. "Haven't been to sleep yet." Dad replied, his voice surprisingly energetic. Too much to do. How did the meeting go? I filled him in on the discussion with Rebecca and the other stakeholders, describing the surprising offer of a joint venture partnership. Smart woman, Dad commented when I finished. She recognizes that buildings are only as good as the people who create them. He paused. Have you decided which team members to approach first? I've made a list, but Dad, I'm concerned about asking people to take this risk. Mitchell Construction is established, with a steady flow of projects. I'm offering uncertainty. Are you? Dad challenged gently. From what you've told me about Mark's plans, many of these people may find themselves sidelined or even let go as he brings in his own team. You're not just offering risk. You're offering opportunity and continuity of the values that brought them to Mitchell in the first place. He was right, of course. Mark's revised protocols memo had made it clear that dramatic changes were coming. I need to move quickly, I said, making a decision. Before Mark has time to lock people into new contracts or projects. Use my home office as your command center, Dad suggested. It's private, and I have all the company historical documents you might need. Plus, he added with a slight chuckle, it would drive Mark crazy to know we're operating right under his nose. 2 hours later, I had set up in Dad's spacious home office. The large oak table that had hosted countless family dinners was now covered with incorporation documents, project files, and my ever-expanding action plan. Dad had arranged for his personal attorney, Martin Goldman, to join us to handle the legal aspects of establishing the new company. The incorporation papers are straightforward, Martin explained, adjusting his reading glasses as he reviewed the documents. We can have Mitchell Legacy Builders officially registered by the end of the day. The trickier part will be navigating the non-compete issues and ensuring a clean transition for any employees who choose to join you. Mark will fight this, I said. He'll claim I'm violating my obligations to Mitchell Construction. Martin nodded, his expression calm and confident. Which is precisely why we're going to be meticulously careful about how we proceed. We don't want to give him any legitimate legal grounds to interfere. He outlined a careful strategy for approaching team members, emphasizing that they couldn't be solicited while still employed by Mitchell Construction, couldn't remove any proprietary documents or information, and would need to follow proper resignation procedures. The key, Martin explained, is that they must make their own decisions to leave based on their professional judgment, not because you've actively recruited them away. And how do we manage that distinction? I asked. Martin smiled. By being transparent about your new venture, but scrupulously careful about how you discuss it. Let me show you exactly what you can and cannot say. For the next hour, he coached me on the precise language to use when informing colleagues about my new company, emphasizing that I could share information but not extend explicit invitations while they remained Mitchell employees. As Martin finished his legal briefing, my phone buzzed with a text from Javier Mendez. Just got assigned to a strip mall renovation in the suburbs. All sustainability elements removed from Wellington Heights. Something's very wrong here. Can we talk? The perfect opening. I need to start making calls, I told Dad and Martin. Martin nodded. Remember the boundaries we discussed. Information, not solicitation. My first call was to Javier, who answered immediately. Ellie, what the hell is happening? Your brother has reassigned everyone from the Horizon projects and completely gutted the sustainability plans we spent months developing. I know, Javier. I've been terminated from Mitchell Construction. Mark is taking the company in a new direction. His shock was audible. Terminated? You? That's insane. You're the reason we have the Horizon account in the first place. Things are changing rapidly, I acknowledged. I wanted to let you know that I'm establishing a new company, Mitchell Legacy Builders, focused on the sustainable, community-centered approach that's being abandoned. I carefully followed Martin's coaching, providing information without directly asking Javier to join me. Is Horizon going with you? He asked immediately. cutting to the heart of the matter. Horizon has concerns about the changes to their projects. They're exploring their options. Javier didn't need more hints. I need to be part of whatever you're doing, Ellie. This strip mall project is a professional step backward, and the changes to Wellington Heights violate everything we promised. The community? I appreciate your support, Javier. If you're considering a change, I should mention that Martin Goldman is helping me with the legal aspects. He's suggested that anyone interested in discussing opportunities should do so after submitting their resignation. Say no more, Javier replied. My resignation letter will be on Mark's desk within the hour. Where can I meet you after? Similar conversations followed throughout the morning. Careful, legally vetted discussions with key team members. By noon, 7 people had contacted me after submitting their resignations, with 3 more planning to resign by the end of the day. Meanwhile, Dad had been working his own connections, reaching out to industry partners, suppliers, and subcontractors to inform them of the new venture. Martin had drafted the formal termination notice for the Horizon contract, citing the key personnel clause and the unauthorized project changes. My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. Eleanor Mitchell? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Speaking. This is Janet Williams from the Chicago Business Journal. We're hearing rumors of a major shakeup at Mitchell Construction, with you leaving to start a competing firm. Care to comment? Mark must have leaked the story, trying to control the narrative. I glanced at Martin, who nodded and slid a notepad toward me with hastily written guidelines. Yes, I can confirm that I've left Mitchell Construction and am establishing Mitchell Legacy Builders, a new company dedicated to continuing the community-focused, sustainable construction principles that have guided my career. This decision comes after Mitchell Construction's new leadership indicated a shift away from those values. And your father, Robert Mitchell, where does he stand in all this? I looked at Dad, who gave me a thumbs up. My father supports this new venture. He believes strongly in the importance of upholding the original Mitchell Construction values of integrity, community investment, and quality craftsmanship. We've also heard that Horizon Developments is terminating their relationship with Mitchell Construction. Is that related to your departure? You would need to speak with Horizon directly about their decisions. What I can say is that our new company is committed to building the kind of meaningful, community-enhancing projects that have defined my work over the past 5 years. After finishing the interview, I looked at Martin. Was that okay? Perfect, he confirmed. Professional, factual, and focused on your positive vision rather than criticism of Mitchell Construction. Dad's phone rang next. It was Monica. Robert, it's chaos here, she reported, her voice lowered as if she were hiding in a corner to make the call. 9 resignations already this morning, including all the key people from the sustainability and community engagement teams. Mark is livid. He's threatening legal action against anyone who's contacted Ellie. Has he mentioned me? Dad asked. Not directly, but he's scheduled an emergency board meeting for 3 p.m. The agenda just says, addressing recent departures and contractual violations. After hanging up, Dad turned to me with a determined expression. He's going to try to legally block us from operating. We need to move faster than he anticipates. Martin was already reaching for his phone. I'll call Judge Peterson. We might need a preemptive injunction if Mark tries to overreach with non-compete enforcement. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The newly resigned team members began arriving at Dad's house, each bringing valuable insights about ongoing projects and operations. Sophie Chen had downloaded all her personal notes and documentation from projects she had managed. Nothing proprietary, but her own observations and learnings that would prove invaluable. Tyler had brought his portfolio of design concepts that had never been implemented at Mitchell Construction. Rebecca Torres called with an update from Horizon's end. Our legal team has prepared the contract termination notice, she informed me. We'll deliver it to Mitchell Construction at the close of business today, with the formal announcement of our new partnership to follow tomorrow morning. How detailed should we be about the reason for termination? I asked. Very. We're citing the key personnel clause, the unauthorized project changes, and the attempt to increase fees while reducing deliverables. We want this to be airtight. By mid-afternoon, Martin had completed the incorporation process for Mitchell, Legacy Builders. Dad had made calls to his banking connections, securing preliminary approval for the operating lines of credit we would need. The joint venture agreement with Horizon was taking shape, with David Chen sending draft documents for our review. At 2:45 p.m., just as we were reviewing the office space options that Sophie had researched, my phone rang. It was Mark. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but Dad shook his head. Take it, but put it on speaker so Martin can monitor, I answered, activating the speakerphone. Hello, Mark. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded, his voice tight, with fury. 9 resignations this morning, all from people on your projects. The Business Journal calling for comments about a new company. You realize this is a clear violation of your non-compete agreement, right? Martin motioned for me to keep my response simple and non-confrontational. I've established a new company that aligns with my professional values. I haven't violated any agreements. You're poaching our employees and interfering with client relationships. Mark's voice rose. The board is meeting in 15 minutes to authorize legal action against you. This little revenge project of yours will be shut down before it even starts. I haven't poached anyone, Mark. People make their own career decisions. Save it for the judge, he snapped. And where's Dad? His phone goes straight to voicemail. Is he helping you with this betrayal? Dad raised an eyebrow but remained silent, letting me handle the conversation. Dad is aware of my plans. As for betrayal, I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. I think we have very different definitions of that word. You called an emergency board meeting while I was away, had me removed from the company our father built, and immediately began dismantling the client relationships and project approaches I'd developed. It was a business decision, Mark insisted. The company needed to evolve beyond your limited relationship-focused approach. And how's that working out so far? I couldn't resist asking. 9 resignations on day 1 doesn't suggest a smooth evolution. Mark's response was coldly calculating. People can be replaced. What can't be replaced is the Mitchell construction reputation and client base, both of which you're attempting to steal. I'm not stealing anything, Mark. I'm creating something new that honors the true Mitchell legacy. Using our family name, Mitchell Legacy Builders, you think that won't confuse the market? Martin gave me a thumbs up. Mark was revealing that he'd already investigated our new company name, which could help if he later claimed he wasn't aware of our specific plans. There's no market confusion in honoring our father's legacy while you take Mitchell Construction in a new direction. This conversation is pointless, Mark declared. Our attorneys will be contacting you by the end of the day. I suggest you reconsider this ill-conceived venture before you destroy what's left of your professional reputation. The call ended abruptly. Martin looked pleased. He's rattled, and he made several statements that could work in our favor if this goes to court. Dad checked his watch. The board meeting is starting. Monica will let us know what happens. As we waited for news, I gathered the team that had assembled in Dad's living room, now the de facto headquarters of Mitchell Legacy Builders. 13. People who had taken an enormous professional risk based on their trust in me and their commitment to the values we shared. I want to thank all of you, I began, emotion tightening my throat. What you've done today, walking away from security toward an uncertain future, takes extraordinary courage. It's not courage, Sophie interjected. It's self-preservation. The company Mark is creating isn't one I want to be part of. Javier nodded. We didn't sign up to build strip malls and cut corners. We signed up to create spaces that make communities better. Tyler, the young architect, spoke up. Besides, we're not following Mitchell Construction. We're following you, Ellie. You're the one who gave people like me a chance when other firms wouldn't. Their words filled me with both gratitude and responsibility. These people had entrusted their professional futures to my vision. I couldn't let them down. "Then let's make this official," I said, turning to Martin. "What's our next step?" "We've completed the incorporation. The banking arrangements are being finalized. The office lease can be signed tomorrow." He checked his phone, which had just buzzed with a message. "And that's from David Chen. The joint venture agreement with Horizon is ready for your review." Dad smiled, the pride evident in his eyes. "Sounds like Mitchell Legacy Builders is officially in business. Now we just need to decide on the logo." As everyone laughed, breaking the tension of the intense day, Monica called with news from the board meeting. "They've authorized legal action," she reported. "Mark's having cease and desist letters prepared. But here's the interesting part. 3 board members abstained from the vote. They're concerned about the optics of suing the founder's daughter, especially with Robert supporting your new venture." The first battle lines had been drawn. Mark had the Mitchell construction name and legal team, but we had the people, relationships, and values that had made the company successful in the first place. My phone buzzed with an email notification from Rebecca Torres. The formal termination notice had been delivered to Mitchell Construction, effective immediately. The message included a photo of Chad Jenkins's stunned expression as he accepted the document. The first move had been made. There was no turning back now. 3 months after that fateful day when Mark fired me, I stood in the gleaming lobby of our completed Wellington Heights Community Center. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was minutes away, with city officials, community leaders, and the press gathered outside. Through the glass doors, I could see Mark watching from across the street. His expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. His legal maneuvers had failed. His attempts to undermine our new company had backfired, only generating more positive press for Mitchell Legacy Builders. Dad appeared beside me, looking healthier than he had in months. "He's still trying to figure out how he lost," Dad said, nodding toward Mark. "He never understood what really made the company successful," I replied. "It wasn't the name or the contracts, it was the people and the relationships." As we walked outside to join Rebecca Torres and our team for the ceremony, my phone buzzed with a message. Mitchell Construction was being acquired by a national firm, with Mark transitioning to a strategic advisor role. I smiled as I slipped my phone away and picked up the ceremonial scissors. Some called it karma. I called it the natural consequence of forgetting that business is ultimately about people, a lesson my father had taught me from the very beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.